Last year we set out to grow the most amount of food we have ever grown, and today I'm wanting to share with you exactly how the season went, how each crop did, and how much food we actually grew. Our goal was to grow enough staple crops like potatoes and pumpkins to feed our big family for an entire year. This was a big goal for us because the previous years we'd only had a modest sized kitchen garden, and feeding a big family takes a lot of food. But nonetheless, we hired a rotary hoe, bought some seeds and seed potatoes, and got our hands in the dirt. I have brought my clipboard with my notes. So one of the first things that we planted were onions. Now, we planted hundreds of them. We planted brown ones and we planted red onions as well. Now, we planted them in two different spots, one of them being right here in this garden. And the reason why we planted them here is because this spot gets the most sun out of the entire property. And onions need a lot of sunlight to grow. Because we couldn't fit as many as we wanted in this area, we decided to plant the rest of them out on the big veggie patch. The onions that were here did great, and the ones that we had to plant elsewhere, not so much. Unfortunately, with the other crops out there on that patch being potatoes, the potato plants quickly outgrew the onion plants and overshaded them. So those didn't do much growing and were a total fail. All in all, I think we harvested a full crate of brown onions and a little over half of a crate of red onions. I will say by the time the tops had flopped over on the red onions and they were ready to harvest, the onions had actually started to split. But this doesn't seem to be affecting their ability to store, as they're still storing really well a few months on. The thing with the brown onions is that we did two sowings, one being early winter for a spring harvest and a second bigger sowing in the spring for a late summer harvest. The onions sown in early winter still grew really nice and big, and it was great to have onions ready for eating earlier on in the season. But one thing we did notice with these is that the stalks on them grew really thick and they didn't really dry out well, and so I don't think they would have been very good for storage. Whereas the ones sown in spring, they still got really nice big bulbs on them, but the stalks on them were a lot thinner, so they were easier to dry out and much more suitable for storage. So I am super glad that we did our bigger main sowing in the springtime, and we'll definitely be doing that again next year. I was a little bit unprepared for planting garlic. I don't even remember if we bought any planting garlic or if we just used leftover stuff from the previous year that we'd grown. But anyway, it grew well and we harvested around 80 bulbs of mixed sizes. This sounded like a lot to us, but honestly, since we've not been buying any other garlic to supplement this like we had previous years, and we're quite heavy garlic consumers, we have already gone through quite a lot of it. I think there's about a quarter of what we grew left. I did plant a little bit more garlic than this, what would have equated to around 10 bulbs, but with that being planted in a different area and harvest time being around the same time as I was giving birth, I did not end up harvesting that in time to eat. I didn't end up harvesting it until later in the autumn, and when I did harvest it, all the bulbs have split and it was no good for storage. But it'll be perfect for planting out this season, so that along with all the stuff I've bought from Bulbs Direct, I think we should have plenty of garlic come the end of the year. One thing I am going to do differently next time round is, instead of planting garlic all throughout my garden beds, I'm going to put it in a dedicated space, at least the majority of it anyway. One reason for this is often our other plants would need watering a lot more than our garlic would, and with it being in a place where we have our sprinkler irrigation, our garlic usually ends up getting that rust fungus on the leaves, which is not great for the plant's overall health. So we're going to try putting it in a dedicated spot this year, somewhere where we can just water it by hand, and we'll see how that goes. Last time I tried to grow corn, it was a total fail, but this time round I'm pretty happy with the results. Once all the garlic was out, we planted some corn in the back half of this garden bed, and we also planted some down here in this small section once we pulled the tulips out. I think back in autumn 2025 we had a lot of flooding in this garden bed here, especially in the back corner, and I think that just meant that when it came to planting the corn, the ground at the back there was really hard, so only about half of what we planted actually came up. So the corn in the larger space back there didn't do so well. Seeds only germinated sporadically, plants grew really small, and they just pollinated really poorly, which definitely wasn't helped by all the rain we had back in December. So no big harvest from that area, but we got a really decent harvest from this small area here. The soil is just so nice and soft, and I think it's still just got heaps of good nutrients in from back when we planted the tulips in here. All of the corn seeds germinated, the plants grew healthy and strong, and they all pollinated really well. I think in the end we harvested around 2 crates of corn, so that was enough for fresh eating twice, some to give away, and a little bit to freeze for I think 2 other dinners. I don't know if I'll plant corn again next season. It's such a nice treat, but with sunny space being so limited on this property, I may prioritize this growing space for growing more onions or something like that. But we'll see, I might change my mind. I have always struggled with our cucumbers being susceptible to powdery mildew. After doing a bunch of research and watching some YouTube videos, I decided I wasn't going to rush into planting them until it was for sure warm enough for them and that I would do multiple plantings of them. So I ended up planting them in the late spring, in the early summer, and again in the late summer. And this worked out so well. It meant when the first plants slowed down in production or died from powdery mildew, that I still had a consistent supply of cucumbers coming in. We were eating them fresh and we were pickling them, and oh my goodness, they were so good. I think we've already been through like 10 jars and only have 1 jar left, which I'm super sad about. So I will definitely be continuing this method of doing multiple plantings, and I'm also going to plant even more cucumber plants than I did this year so that I can pickle a bunch more because they were just so yum. Carrots are something that I think we will grow all year round and never have enough of. We love to use them in salads like coleslaws, boil them, and our favourite, roast them. This year, over several different plantings and several different garden beds, and despite the chickens trashing a few garden beds a few times, we managed to grow around 40 kilos of carrots. This isn't enough to feed our big family for an entire year, but it did feed us all throughout spring and summer. We didn't have to buy carrots for a few months, and not only was it worth it for lowering our supermarket bill alone, but they taste so much better. They are so good roasted, and we just love eating these carrots. So we're going to keep on growing them. And hopefully one day we will be able to grow enough carrots to feed our family for an entire year. As you can see, I've already got some carrots growing now, as we can basically grow them all year round here. They just slow down a little bit in the winter, so hopefully these will be ready really soon. We had mixed levels of success with some of our warm weather loving crops. Firstly, I had no luck starting peppers from seed this year, so we ended up going and buying some seedlings. I just feel like capsicum is kind of hard to grow here in Canterbury. I have always struggled with it. I've always struggled with not having enough warmth and enough sunlight and stuff like that. They've just never really grown well for me. This year they grew okay, but even though they were in raised beds, bugs ended up getting to them before I could realize, and so I only ended up getting a handful of them. The jalapenos, on the other hand, did so well. They grew so abundantly. My only issues were that my kids kept picking them too early, or that they were forgotten about on the bench and got wasted. So this year I will probably plan to plant them again, but I will just make sure to pickle them right away so they don't go to waste. And because my husband loves spicy stuff and he would love to have them on hand. I did manage to grow eggplants from seed, but for whatever reason, they just seemed to stall and took forever to grow and to flower. They eventually became big and bushy, but of course, by the time they were starting to flower, it was December and we had all that wet weather, so none of the flowers would pollinate and turn into fruit. Basically, the eggplants were a fail. The fruit did start growing in late summer, but it started to rot on the plant as the weather started turning cold. Each year that we have these raspberry plants, they give to us more and more. I think in the spring, summer, they were giving us around a punnet every other day. Unfortunately, when the bad weather hit in December, that pretty much finished them off and they were done for the season. Mum had bought some strawberry runners to replace our strawberry plants that we'd had for the past few years. And oh my goodness, these plants did amazing. The strawberries were so big and were honestly some of the best strawberries I had ever tasted. These plants had a pause over December with that cold weather and the rain, but they have got flowers on now, so it'll be interesting to see if we get any more strawberries or not before the cold weather really sets in. We are making sure to take runners from these and are planting a new strawberry patch over the other side of the property behind our veggie patch. So hopefully those take. The chickens have been a little bit of a nuisance, making a mess and scratching them up and things like that. But hopefully we'll have that all under control for next season and we'll be able to get another really great strawberry harvest. Back in 2025, we also got some blueberry plants, but I did not give these enough attention. These poor blueberry plants, we only got them earlier in 2025, planted them in the ground and failed to water them regularly. So we didn't get anything from them, but I will try again next year to take better care of them. This herb garden is looking a little bit of a mess right now, but that's okay. All in all the various herbs grew really well. We grew heaps of basil and made lots of fresh basil pesto, and we also froze some basil as well, so we've got that to use for later on. A lot of the other herbs we enjoyed fresh in some salads. I did get to drying some herbs, but next year I will definitely try and be a little bit more proactive and get that done in the springtime when the plants are at their best, and also just dry more of them. I've been experimenting with making different seasonings and things, and they are really good, so I'll need some more dry herbs for that. This season we definitely grew more tomatoes than we've ever grown before. I will say that although we grew more than ever, because we basically had a whole month of rain and terrible weather right in the middle of summer, our main crop of heirloom tomatoes began to die off before the fruit had even started to ripen. And so I think we got a lot less fruit than we would have had the weather just been stable, but that's out of our control. We grew these tomatoes with the intentions of canning them and making sauces and things like that, which we did get to do. But honestly, we were only able to make enough just to enjoy throughout the autumn, as well as make a few bottles of sauce. As for the amount of sunlight those tomatoes got as the season went on in the garden bed they were in, there was definitely less and less sunlight, but luckily there was still enough for the fruit that had grown to ripen. So at this stage, I do still plan on planting some over in that veggie patch again this year, and I will probably just plant another lot somewhere else, just so that we can up our volume and hopefully make some more barbecue sauce that will last us a little bit longer into the year. I also wondered if a hybrid might do better than an heirloom variety, so I'll put some thought to that. As you can see behind me, we also grew cherry tomatoes in our glass house, which have done so well. We've had a really long season of them, they just keep reducing, and we actually even harvested a decent sized bowl of them just yesterday. We've been eating them fresh in salads and also using them towards making the sauces. So we will definitely be growing these again. We generally have quite a short growing season for warm weather loving crops. And with having a month of cold and wet weather back in December, the kumara was a total fail. I always like to think, what did I do wrong? What can I learn from this? And how can I do better next year? Something that did even better than I could have ever dreamed of were our crown pumpkins. I have honestly struggled for years now trying to grow pumpkins with the lack of sunlight that we have on this property. But boy did God answer my prayers, because I didn't even plant a single pumpkin seed before they all started popping up where I had laid down our compost here on this garden bed and over on some raised garden beds and in our yard, and it was just amazing. We got so many pumpkins. I would actually be there tearing up little pumpkin plants because there were just too many growing. We ended up yielding over 70 pumpkin plants, which is amazing. I am so stoked with that. The butternut squash pumpkins, on the other hand, were a total fail. I only ended up harvesting one of them, so I'll just need to give them a more caring go next time because they just don't seem as resilient or hardy as the crown pumpkins. We set out to grow 200 kilos of potatoes this season, and unfortunately we did not reach that goal. But honestly, I am so stoked with what we were able to grow. It's so much more than we have ever grown before. I think previously we'd grown like 20 kilos of potatoes or something and eaten them over the summer. This year we grew an early variety called Apache. We got a good wee harvest of those to see us through Christmas and New Year's. And then we ended up bringing in 100 kilos of Agria potatoes, which we are absolutely stoked with. This is what we predicted the yield to be, so that was totally awesome. And not only that, but some of those potatoes were the biggest ones I have ever seen. Unfortunately, we did have a complete potato fail with another variety that we planted. It was a late variety white potato, and I can't remember the name of it, but we got it because it was meant to be good for storing long term. Unfortunately, that crop did terribly, and we got something like 10 kilos maybe of it, and they were all these teeny tiny new potato size, so that sucked. But at least they were still good for making potato salad with. I think the reason why that crop failed was just due to the bad luck of the bad weather in December, timed with the planting, and it just caused the roots to rot. And yeah, at this stage we still have 2 full crates of our agri potatoes, so they're definitely not going to feed us for the full year, but they would have seen us through a few months, so that's great. Next year we'll probably just stick with the agri ones because they're our favourites anyway, and they did so well. And hopefully then we'll be able to grow enough to feed our family for an entire year. So all in all, not everything went to plan this season, but I am honestly so grateful for what we were able to grow. We learned so much and grew more food than ever before, and for the first time really started taking bigger steps to feed our family from this land. There were definitely failures. Lost crops to weather, planting things in the wrong spot, pests, disease, and simply just not enough sunlight for some things. But I think that's just part of gardening, especially when you're trying to upscale things and learn as you go. Every season teaches something new. And honestly, looking back now at the crates of the onions, the potatoes, all of the pumpkins, all the sauces we were able to make, all the herbs we were able to dry, and all the meals that came straight from the garden, it really does make all the hard work worth it. I'm really excited and hopeful for the next season. We've got plans to grow even more food, improve systems, become smarter, and hopefully become even more self-sufficient. Thank you so much for following along our journey and supporting our family. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing if you're not already, and like this video if you did. And YouTube thinks you might like one of these videos up here, so go ahead and check them out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.